I don't know what made me stop and peek around the bedroom door. Perhaps it was the eerie quiet. The TV was off and the living room in near darkness, only a small lamp, barely casting its faint light. It must have been instinctual to stop and peer, to squint, to blink and then recoil at the sight that met my befuddled gaze. I wish I hadn't. I wish I had. Sooner, much sooner. I had been half asleep, but now I was wide awake, fully awake. Perhaps I had always been suspicious, but refrained from seeking evidence. Feelings that something was not quite right had always lain simmering beneath the surface, and now, not this. Surely not this. Not in a million years would I have ever dreamed, imagined. My mind refuted what I was witnessing, and I almost dropped the bottle of water I was holding. My fingers momentarily slack as the strength drained from my legs, and you wouldn't believe me. You'd think me mad if I told you what I saw. I wasn't even sure it was real, not some heat-induced hallucination. I bit down on my clenched fist and I closed the door, wincing as the latch clicked home. I was again plunged into pitch darkness, the sort of black that was so thick it wrapped itself around you. It hadn't bothered me when I'd first stumbled half asleep from my bed, but now it felt like hands would reach out and grab me. Now it was terrifying. I made the sign of the cross as I took a slow, tentative step away from the door, and then another, and another, until I felt the foot of the bed dig into the back of my legs. I cried out, a combination of fright and pain. Had he heard me? Jesus, protect me from evil, from manifestations. Jesus, protect me. My heart was beating at an impossible pace, and yet it felt sluggish and heavy. I held my breath as I quietly slipped back into bed. A small wave of relief. He would never know I had seen him now, even if he were to burst through the door. I had a moment of respite, time to think if what I had seen was real, a dream, a nightmare, or just my imagination. But I really didn't want to think. What I really wanted to do, what my scrambled reason screamed at me to do, was run into the nursery, grab the baby and be out the back door before he was aware I was awake, aware I had witnessed everything. But how could I? He would catch me and probably kill me, maybe even kill the baby. I would be dead before I reached the car. This was not a sit down and let's discuss situation. I could make no compromises. It just was. There were some things you instinctively knew you would never be allowed to live to tell. You would never get the chance to tell the tale. I lay on my back and stared into the dark, my mind a rush of incoherent thoughts. They whizzed past my mind's eye at a pace I couldn't keep up with. I needed to calm down. I squeezed the bottle to my chest and gritted my teeth. Everything screamed to get out, grab the baby and run. I turned on my side and reached out, feeling for the bedside table. Eventually locating it, I placed the bottle on the surface, nudging the book I had been reading aside. We were in the middle of a heat wave and I'd woken up soaked in sweat. The humidity was ridiculous. I was exhausted from the constant, unrelenting high temperatures. The air muggy, stifling and heavy. It was hard to catch your breath. I had a thumping dehydration headache and I needed to check on the baby. I hadn't been spying on him. Why would I? I genuinely needed water. I heard the bedroom door open and I heard him enter the room, then stand for a second and then another. Why was he standing there? I slowed my breathing to make it appear like I was sleeping. Had he seen me watching him? I felt hot tears trickle down my cheeks. I'd never cried from sheer terror before. Why was he just standing there? Oh God, my instinct to sniff and wipe my nose was overpowering. He would know something was wrong. I needed to be quiet. Quiet. So quiet. I heard the footsteps purposefully cross the bedroom to the bed. Somehow louder than I ever remember them being. Much louder. My senses were on high alert and everything was magnified. Every noise, creak, shuffle, full of malicious intent. I was holding my breath again and I needed to breathe. I desperately needed to breathe. I could feel his eyes probing the dark, boring into my back, thinking, perhaps suspicious. A feeling engulfed me, familiar. I felt like a child again, playing hide and seek, when you knew the seeker had spotted you and was standing there staring at your foot or hand that you had unwittingly left exposed. The anticipation of being grabbed and pulled from your hiding place. The feeling was not one of excited fear tinged with anticipation that I felt as a child. There would be no squeals of childish delight as the seeker honed in on me, rather screams of terror. I heard him take off his shoes. The sheets rustled and I felt the bed sag as he got in beside me. I scrunched my eyes shut as if that would somehow protect me. I felt his hand on my shoulder. It was cold and heavy, and my soul shriveled, crawled away to hide deep within me. It was all I could do not to leap from the bed and run screaming from the room. Maybe I should make a run for it. Maybe now, or maybe just wait. Just wait. He would soon fall asleep. That's what he did. 9 times out of 10 he would fall asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. But does he sleep, or is he pretending and still watching me? Always watching me. I was a prisoner, and I had for a time had this nagging feeling that my freedom was curtailed. But I never pushed the boundaries, so never knew for sure. But now I know. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been off of the farm, seen my parents. It must have been a month since we spoke. He made the runs into town to pick up groceries and the like. I always thought, or rather chose to think, he was just attentive, knowing I was busy with the baby. On the rare occasions I'd suggested we go into town, he made excuses. I never pushed the issue. Everything about him was suspect now, and for my child's sake I needed to be calm and wait. Wait. Just wait. It had begun to rain and I could hear the faint rumble of thunder in the distance. I'd wait for it to draw closer and perhaps, using it to drown out any noise I might make, I could sneak out. He had been laying on his back and I heard him turn on his side. I heard him turn over. I figured he was facing the window away from me. He was sleeping. I was sure of it. He would soon start snoring. I usually hated that sound, but now I prayed for it. I shifted my leg, my intention to let it quietly drop to the floor and maneuver myself into a position where I could seamlessly slide out of the bed. I inched it towards the edge and then stopped. The sheet snagged my foot. I let out a sob and heard him stir. I closed my eyes. He could practically see in the dark, but of course he could. I made like my best fake sleeping. If he turned towards me, I was done for. I couldn't wait till morning. Everything inside me told me so. I didn't want to make small talk suffer his embraces, the pretense, the facade. It was impossible. I needed to get away tonight. He was still facing the window. I should just get up and pretend I was going to the loo, check on the baby. There were a million reasons for getting up in the middle of the night. There were a million reasons why he never came to bed at the same time as me. Always an excuse. And now, after 2 years, I knew the real reason. I got up and swung my feet onto the wooden floor. It felt cool under my feet. I made it out of the bedroom and into the baby's nursery. I stared down at him, sleeping peacefully in his crib, not a care in the world. He looked like me, nothing like his father. I gulped and brushed his dark hair from his forehead. I needed to unlock the front door and grab the car keys. I didn't need to be fumbling with the lock and juggling the baby at the same time. I needed a clear and unhindered route to the door. I ran my hand over the mantelpiece, the side table. Where the fuck were they? I let out an involuntary yelp of pain as I stubbed my toe on some unseen obstacle. I crouched, dropping it furiously. It felt like I'd broken it. It felt numb. It was all I could do not to roll around the floor in agony. I couldn't find the keys. I couldn't see to find the keys. Turning the lights on was too risky. I wrung my hands in frustration, my toes still throbbing. This is impossible. I would never get away. I had already wasted too much time. A sudden clap of thunder made me jump. My eyes darted towards the bedroom door. I could hear him snoring, and then lightning illuminated the room. Briefly, but enough for me to spy the keys on the coffee table. I muttered a short prayer of thanks as I grabbed them. God was on my side. God would get me out of this situation. No wonder he had insisted on this remote farm, I thought as I hobbled back towards the nursery. It was all so clear now. I wanted to be closer to my parents, especially with the baby. He had bought the farm already, he told me. A late wedding present, remembering how I said I always wanted to live in the country. Yes, I had said that, but this was so remote it felt as if no one else existed but us. That's what he did. He would ask me after the event as if my opinion mattered, and it didn't really matter if I was happy or not, because he was always one step ahead of me. And it always seemed like it was for my happiness, but it wasn't. Not really. The nearest neighbour was at least 5 miles away. He had chosen this out-of-the-way, God-forbidden place because it would be harder for me to escape. I barely knew how to start his massive 4-wheel drive that stood parked a ways from the house. Why did he park it so far away? He was clever, maybe too clever, and surely that should have been a sign. Miles to go before I sleep suddenly popped into my head as I picked the baby up. He stirred and thankfully settled back in my arms. A deep sleeper just like his father. And then a horrible thought entered my head, and for years after I would shy away from even admitting to myself that it had been a real consideration. I stared down at the child, and for the first time since his birth my love wavered. The thought to put him back down and leave him with his father. He would surely become his father eventually. God forgive me. It appalled me as I struggled for a second, and then I squeezed him close to me and grabbed a blanket covering him as best I could. I had no time for bottles or nappies. I stood petrified in the middle of the living room and listened, and I could still hear him snoring. I tiptoed to the front door, and then the snoring stopped, and I stopped. And as if to compound my misery, my heart sank. Surely he was awake now. I didn't wait to find out. I was sure another flash of lightning would show him standing in the doorway, and my imagination ran with that, and I would not be hanging around for the inevitable. I pulled the door open, under the rolling tail end of the dissipating sound, praying it would mask the creak of the door. My shoulders and back tingled with anticipation of a hand, heavy and restraining, pulling me back into the nightmare. My chest hurt and my heart raced, and I was afraid it would stop from sheer terror. I shut the door behind me and hobbled as fast as I could to the car. I slipped a couple of times, barely maintaining my balance. I hadn't even bothered stopping for my shoes. I could feel the mud squelching between my toes as I held the baby closer, trying to shield him from the rain. A 2-pronged fork of lightning lit up the night sky, and cold rain beat down relentlessly. He was awake now, protesting loudly, and I kissed his forehead over and over to reassure him as the rain mingled with our tears. I slipped and slid my way to the vehicle, eventually reaching it. I fumbled with the buckles on the baby seat and cooed to him as I strapped him in, a little tighter than usual. I dared not look back. I wanted to, but it would be a waste of precious time looking back. I started the car, shocked that we had made it thus far. Miles to go before I sleep. Sleep being the ultimate prize, the reward. I muttered the mantra again and again and again as I thought of the long journey ahead to my parents. It seemed to ground me, tell me what I had to do and to keep my shit together. First I had to get off this farm, and as I put the car in reverse, a flash of lightning illuminated him. His vast form striding towards the car, sure-footed as a mountain goat. I screamed and the car simultaneously stalled. I heard him grab at the car door and I cringed away from it. I continued to turn the key again and again, sobbing in sheer terror. I screamed and cowered, my arms over my head as he smashed his fist against the window, and I heard it splinter as the glass cracked. Glancing back at the baby, my arms still over my head, I notice the lock of the passenger door, and my heart sinks. Prickles of fear dance across my skin. I glance out the window, and his face is pressed up against the cracked glass, his mouth twisted in a snarl. The rain, almost a wall of water, beats down on him, and yet he's not fazed. He doesn't flinch or even blink at the onslaught. He smashes his ham-sized fist into the glass again, not once taking his eyes off of me, as if studying my reaction, intent on terrorizing me into submission. I don't recognize the eyes that look back, glaring wide and staring. I track his gaze as his eyes slide slyly to the unlocked door and then back to my face. We both go for the door at the same precise moment. I hear him grab at the handle. My heart skips a beat. Only his hand must have slipped to give me precious seconds to reach out past the baby and smash the lock down. Jesus Christ! I muttered through gritted teeth as the car rocked and almost toppled on its side. I grabbed the steering wheel as the car teetered, then righted itself, smashing back to the ground. Not now, I sobbed as I struggled with the gears. I heard the car door buckle under the force of something ramming into it, and I didn't look, because if I did I would freeze and all would be lost. He rammed the door again. I heard him scream in rage, or was that the wind? The engine spluttered to life. The wheels skidded in the muddy driveway, and then finding traction I gummed the engine, sending a spray of mud into the air. I sped past his fields of swaying corn that bent as one, every which way the wind blew. They were eerie in the sporadic bursts of lightning, like limbless people waving me goodbye. I sped past the barn I'd never seen the inside of, and I wondered what the fuck was in there. The rain lashed the windscreen, and the wipers worked furiously as I leaned forward, wiping the condensation from the window. I accelerated as I drew closer to the gate. I cooed to the baby, who was now near hysterical, wailing at the top of his lungs. I shrugged my seatbelt on and braced myself for the impact. And then, as if from nowhere, he stepped out in front of the car, between me and the gates. And why bother wondering how he'd outrun a car going 60 mph? If he thought I'd swerve, he was sadly mistaken. I ploughed through him and the gate, and I heard him bounce off the roof, and I'm not ashamed to admit I laughed at that. "How do you like them apples?" I yelled at the rearview mirror. "Some real girl power, right there for you." I muttered through clenched teeth as tires screeching, gears grinding. I careened around a tight bend in the road. And then I began to cry, not feeling at all powerful, more like a fool for being taken in. Real girl power was being clever enough to read the signs, to listen to advice and walk the other way, preferably without a baby in tow. I wiped the tears away, and for the first time I allowed myself to wonder what he was. I didn't have a clue. Maybe he'd dabbled in the black arts for so long his time was up and Lucifer had come to collect. I shuddered at that. All that hocus pocus did not sit well with me at all. Was he going to sacrifice me and the child to his master so he could retain some semblance of humanity? Or was it the devil himself? I didn't understand how it or he or whatever it was could have been masquerading for so long. In my life. Lord Jesus, have mercy on me, I whispered under my breath, making the sign of the cross again. How had it come into my life? It's 2019. What the hell were possessed people doing, walking around, sneaking into people's lives, changing into demonics in the middle of the bloody night? It was bloody ludicrous. That's what it was. I cast the thoughts away, thinking now only of the child. I turned the radio on and fiddled with it for a bit. Some music to calm the baby. He liked music. Not taking my eyes off the road, I reached around behind me and patted the baby's leg to reassure him. He was quiet now, and then I heard a hiss and rattling like a maraca. That turned my blood cold, and I screamed, withdrawing my hand as blood spewed and splattered onto the windscreen. I grabbed at my hand less 3 fingers, and I turned in horror to see the baby staring at me with his father's eyes, and then I felt the car overturn. In those seconds my life flashed before my eyes, and finally when the car stopped its roll, I lay there amidst shards of broken glass and twisted metal. I could feel consciousness slipping away. I remember seeing dozens of black lights in the sky, hovering above me. They were never going to let me get away, not with the baby. And he stands there, and yet not him at all. And I really didn't care, because it had been a very, very long night. Too long. Time to sleep. He took the child that I find hard to call my own, and yet I shouldn't blame him. I know he was only a baby and following his instincts. Where they are, I I don't have a clue. Probably back where they belong. I try not to think about them, and I hope they don't visit. I hope the child doesn't come looking for me, perhaps curious about his humanity. I don't think he will, but who can say? Do I love my child, I hear you ask? Can you love him? My answer would simply be yes. Always.